I'm Isyander.
And I'm Coda.
And shocking nobody, the Warp one.
Finally.
Yep, which leaves us with the Schola Progenia and the Servitors duking it out.
So the military Hogwarts, or sad.
It's either Commissar College or you're going to watch Coda getting sad for about one whole episode. Both are going to be pretty good.
Sad.
Both I am very excited for. But today we get to talk about the utterly incomprehensible place that is the Warp. It has thousands of names. I think we've covered most of them at this point.
It's the wacky dimension.
It's the Sea of Souls, the Immaterium, the Imperium.
I like the Imperium.
The Other Sea, the Aether, the Seethe.
Okay, the Other Sea is... I love that.
Yes, it is... They're all...
I now want pirate-themed warp denizens.
They probably exist.
I would love to see them. Someone needs to either draw or animate them.
Okay, this is how I'm going to put it. This is the one episode where I'm going to yearn for a chalkboard the most.
What do you mean by this?
While also mentioning uppercase Abrahamic God, Plato and Jung.
What?
As necessary parts of this.
Okay.
That's just a fact.
I will just...
As the
I will wait for the line that connects these plot points.
Best way to explain the unexplainable.
Okay.
This is genuinely, de facto, just not comprehensible.
Good on the G-Dub for literally creating a fourth dimensional unknowing dimension.
Yeah, and part of it is, the typical writers not defining anything for their own sake because it works out really well for them.
It works.
But also, when they do write about it, they do a very good job about keeping it super
describing what it does instead of what it is.
Yeah, well, this is the thing that the main antagonists come from. This is the thing that gives you faster than light travel. This is the thing that gives you the whole magic system. This is the thing that gives us the Emperor and his kids. All of this is tied to that.
That's a lot of labor and a lot of weight on one concept.
I like it because writers will regularly drive past it. Like any book that has to do with humanity, and they are facing chaos. They are dealing with Space Marines. They're dealing with the Emperor. They're dealing with Custodes. They're dealing with Prime. Basically, any Imperium book has to drive by the Warp every single time, and it's so fun.
Or deals with something warp related.
Yes. People have tried in canon to catalog the Warp, and that's one way I considered doing this.
Isn't that one book that Rupert, the Rupert guy has, just a book that is like, here's the secrets of the Warp, and it's never the same every time you open it?
That's Magnus's diary.
Okay.
Which is, yeah, you're right on the money there. Magnus's diary is this book that you should watch the Thousand Suns episode if you haven't. We cover it there. But it's his little diary, and it contains everything.
Little.
It is, spatially speaking.
Really?
Yes. Okay. The problem is, as you read it, it'll be like rewriting itself. Pages will be reorganizing. It is stuff Magnus both currently knows, already knew, and will know.
It's a book. It is
never all at once.
It is a book that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside.
Sometimes.
Because on the outside, it's like the size of like a little black book.
It's also sometimes useless because this is Magnus's writings, yes, but you have found Kid Magnus's writings. What am I supposed to do with this? This is what he thought the Warp was.
Are we saying that 5-year-old Magnus's like crayon drawings are in there?
Well, I mean, Primarch's lived so long. It's like 19 and edgy, probably. This is his
shame.
Angsty black eyeliner phase is the best way to do it.
That's a shame.
But that's
his Sonic OC Kilgore.
Oh god, no, that's one way you can do the Warp, and that does work. Doing that as a YouTube video would just be me inflicting psychic damage on hundreds of thousands of people, which is fun and will happen at some point, just not today. The other way I could do it is just become deranged throughout this episode.
Okay.
We're not going to do that either. I'm going to try and keep it as taped together as I possibly can.
A shame that we're not going to end this video just screaming and howling.
You must understand, every episode I do, I am the state-mandated hype man for whatever I happen to be talking about, right? I have to be Gravity's hype man today.
I see. Well, it's cool. It goes down at an average of 9.8 meters per second.
And to say it's gravity is underselling it, because what you just did is possible. You can vaguely guess what gravity is going to do in different places at different times fairly accurately.
Yeah.
Brilliant minds have gone through the work to make it so. You can't do that with a warp. There's no such kindness like that.
It is ever shifting, like the sand within a desert dune. Every time you step, the wind will just move those dunes.
Precisely. And the best way to explain that is where we're going to make our first stop. But before we do that, we do have a Patreon.
That we do.
Where you get a bonus episode every single week. This week we did the Titan classes. That was very fun. We got to cover the Psi Titan, which is horrifying.
I want one so badly, but also at the same time,
they're so cool.
I want the friendly Psi Titan.
Right? And then we also are going to be doing another episode that's warp related this week that's going to be very fun. It'll be covering a bunch of stuff that you will see when you watch it over on patreon.com/Isyander.
In this episode, we enter the warp and it just ends with us screaming with the chaos undivided tattoos on our foreheads.
Probably. On top of that, you get access to the community days, which are monthly live streams that are super duper fun.
When's the next one?
Access to the 31st.
The 30th.
30th, 31st that weekend.
Okay.
Access to the Discord, which has just a bunch of awesome people. Pretty much everyone there is cool. You can quote me on that. You can also find me there. You can also find him there. It's super duper fun, as well as a bunch of other perks while helping us keep the lights on and keep making the show happen. So to all of you that are already there, thank you very much. And to those of you doing it as I speak, thank you as well. Now let's get into uppercase God.
Okay, so the first point, I don't know where this line is going to...
Well, uppercase G God, it's not fully uppercase.
Sometimes it's uppercase.
Well, unless it's like Yahweh, which is always uppercase.
I've heard saying his name out loud is a no-no in some circles.
Exactly. And like... Even though you may be watching this on a Sunday, I'm not going to be taking you to church. This is just the best way to explain this. We don't have many good tools, and this is just one that most people will be familiar with, right? And that is the fact that you can't understand it.
It just is what it is.
It's like you know, the way in most Abrahamic religions you have the Holy Trinity, you know, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and they are all the same and all immortal, except we crucified and killed one somehow.
They're all the same, but they're all three different things, but they're all the same.
Exactly.
And
and
it's like okay.
And if you try to crucify, like, say, the Holy Spirit or God, just spit in the wind. You're not. That's just not going to work out for you, right? And so despite them being three things, they're also the one thing. And to us who are just one thing all the time, that's incomprehensible.
That's a little bit different to wrap our brains around.
Yes. It's very... we do not have an analog to that because that never happens, period. And the warp works a lot like that, where you don't have a proper analogy for it because... it does not work as anything does. It has always been.
It just kind of is.
And always will be, and has infinite space, yet exists within the galaxy.
There's no way a human brain is wrapping itself around
Do you
that.
see why I chose to use uppercase G for this?
Yeah.
Right? It's everything within it, like the Chaos Gods, for example, have always existed, but they have not as well. Like, some of them have known birthdays with rather big parties that punch hole in reality. Like, but
just disappear 9 out of 10 Eldar.
Exactly. Slaanesh was born at a date we know and left a mark on the galaxy, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Slaaneshi demons start appearing after Slaanesh is born. That makes sense, yes? Slaaneshi demons were also seen at the beginning of time.
Aha. So it's kind of like... some of these, it's honestly, I think gravity is a good analogy for this because gravity has always existed and we kind of gave different names to it until we gave it a name, and then gravity as a concept like blew up into existence.
That is the best way we have to currently explain how you can have scantily clad demons today and yesterday, despite them having been born at noon.
Well, I feel like you shouldn't need to explain why we have scantily clad demons. We just enjoy it.
Well, it's very... The people who created it do not enjoy it. Let's just say that. That explanation is how we can best wrap this around, where, like, for example, Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, you know, the god of Horm, effectively, has always existed and just was not always awake. But instead was this thing, this force that had not yet been given a name, subtly pushing things in certain directions, you know? Just shoving the Eldar to keep going and going and going until eventually 9 and 10 of them die.
Yeah.
And now that we've... Like, are you still with me here? Like, does this make sense so far?
I think I can... my analogy, again, goes back to the gravity. It's just like, it's always existed. We put a name to it.
And bam.
And bam.
It suddenly appears, right? And that's the way we can best couch this. A lot of the way the warp is visualized, you will see whenever it's spoken about in books, is as a sea. It does not operate like a sea.
There are no waves?
But it has currents.
Okay.
But it's the best way we can... It's like, to go back to gravity, the way we visualize gravity is by putting like a bowling ball on a stretched out bit of fabric. It's not how gravity works.
Not necessarily, no.
Not at all. But for
It's
those of you that
visualization.
for those of you that have not taken a physics class, it's a great way to explain it, man.
It's a good simulation, but it's not a really good
Exactly. It's why we describe
explanation.
It's why we describe space and time as a fabric. I'm sure if one were to gaze upon the true nature of space-time, it wouldn't be like a piece of cloth.
They'd probably come back screaming.
But we come up with these analogies because everyone's interacted with fabric. You know vaguely what fabric's going to do. You know you can play with fabric. You know fabric can fold, bend in on itself. And so it's a very useful way to get this idea into your head.
You can strain the threads in a certain direction and the other ones will be squeezed in the opposite or the direction perpendicular to that stretching.
Exactly. And so in 40K, most of the time people will talk about the warp as an ocean because most of you have at least a rudimentary understanding of it. This is something you can fathom. And this works doubly so because most people will just use the warp for travel. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. We'll get to that later. For now, most rubes are just using it as a bus.
Yeah.
Like that is the Cincinnati Metro they're using. Yeah. Like that is how it works. And it is really fast. And can win wars before they happen.
I'm sensing a butt is coming.
Okay, so I don't think... Have we covered how navigation works?
I've gathered kind of how it works, and I've seen the opening to Dark Tide where navigation is actively happening.
Yes.
It does not look like it's a fun time.
Well, to explain it to anyone who may not know, and just to fully cover all of our bases, when you want to travel somewhere, typically the warp is the fastest way to do it because you go in, you come out. Theoretically, you could even come out earlier. So, like, I could radio in, hey... We were going to win this war, but we were shy 5 men. And you could arrive a couple of hours earlier with 10 men, and we win the war.
So there's some weird space-time things happening here.
Because once you're in the warp, it does not respect time, it does not respect space. It flows upwards, downwards, left, right, it does not matter. That's fully irrelevant. Now, when you're navigating the warp, your ship will go in, a bunch of shields will turn on so you don't immediately go mad, and every shutter in the ship will close.
Don't look at it.
You are not supposed to gaze at it. You will go mad.
Don't look outside. Don't look outside.
If you were to look at it, your eyes would pick one of 4 colors and you'd be screaming one of 4 sentences. And that's how that operates.
I see eldritch horror beyond the mind's comprehension.
Yes. And there's only one shutter that is open while your ship is in there. It is the shutter with the navigator in there, who has a third eye. That is the only way they can safely perceive this. And the way they navigate all of the galaxy and all of time is by using Earth
as a
point.
A
because
North
you can
Star.
always see the Emperor's light, which is just such a hard point.
They are just using Earth as a North Star.
Yes. But to put this in terms that are much easier to understand in scale, imagine you had an ability to get on a bus and you will arrive anywhere, any when. But the bus driver has to navigate using a light that they can see from the Eiffel Tower. And note, the Earth spins and moves. And so the bus driver...
Also, I'm in Cincinnati still.
The bus driver has to know where the Eiffel Tower is, where the Eiffel Tower was over the last couple hundreds of years, and where it might be for the next couple thousand, or you may wind up in like 1500s Bangkok.
I see.
And what are you supposed to do with that?
I see.
You know?
So we have like a 1700s level like astrologer in here with a bunch of map diagrams wildly placed all over.
Navigators are so cool.
Yeah.
They have such a hard job and they pull it off every time. Like seriously,
I would love to just see a navigator's lab.
If we had Jimmy
Because I
Space's,
assume they have a whole room dedicated to them.
oh, they probably do. If we had Jimmy Space's light just beaming off of any structure you want, it could be like the Washington Monument, for goodness sake, right? And you had to navigate with it, it's a miracle if you got anywhere on time.
I mean, how fast is Earth moving at any given time?
Very fast. And they're accounting for that is where Jimmy Space is right now. Now, how does its orbit work? Okay, cool. Now, how does the sun's orbit work? Okay, cool. Now, we just have to remember that vaguely as we go into a place where it's just any when and anywhere and anyhow.
I mean, I think I've seen like a solar system diagram that like traces like a planet's path as it orbits around the sun, as the sun like goes around, and it looks wild. It looks very wild.
And navigators have a very hard job. You could get spat out at the heat death of the universe, and that happens.
Ah, fun.
Some ships go in, never come out. We can only assume they were flung into the far future, into the far past, or were just destroyed by a storm.
The heat of the universe sounds incredibly lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. And then it's at this point we also have to take another stop to introduce another thing that we're going to be using throughout this episode, which is one of Jung's ideas.
Okay.
Which is the idea that on top of the typical unconscious that me and you all have, I would hope you have an unconscious.
I think I have an unconscious.
I think you do too.
Yeah.
There's a collective unconscious,
like the networked brain.
Yes, it is this basic reflection of all of us that is imprinted somewhere else, and it's where all of our archetypes come from. You know, it's why you see gods just kind of repeating a certain pattern in humanity, right? And that is a theory he had. Listen, I'm not getting into the debate raging about Jung, because that's a whole thing. There are people who do not like his work, because the best way I can summarize a genuine academic argument is he's a little woo-woo at times.
I see.
He's a little woo-woo at times.
Well,
I have no horse in this race. This is just a very good thing to use for this one example.
I was just about to say this sounds something very similar to a concept in certain sects of Buddhism that posits there's like a broad social fabric, and rather than being like a person, you are a node on this social fabric.
That works too. That's another good way to look at it. The warp is that social fabric, that collective unconscious made manifest.
And you are a point where two lines intersect.
I would say psychers are.
Okay.
I would say psychers are. Your average Joe, nah, they're just like...
It's probably just one of the lines?
Just a line.
Okay.
Just a line in there. And so this is... Because it's all of us, we can kind of collectively futz with it a little bit, you know? And typically speaking, we tend to... It's a known concept. I'm forgetting the name in psych, but it's very easy to focus on the negative. The human brain is very good about that, because you could focus on the blue sky all the live long day, but that thing will kill you. Look at it.
Yeah.
Right?
Or it can even get as trite as there are 100 good comments on this YouTube video, but I'll focus on the one negative one.
By the way, never have that problem.
Which is awesome.
All of you are awesome.
You are all awesome.
I love that. But so it's already going to skew a little negative, just because people tend to skew a little negative, even in real life, you know? You could be having a really, really good day. The sun's out, but then a cloud blots it just perfect.
And this is the one problem I've had all day.
And
that's the biggest problem.
And it's
now I'm sad.
Dark, but everywhere else is blue. And it's actually pretty temperate today, but you're focused on that one cloud. It's human nature. It's a real thing you kind of have to work against at times. And boy, howdy, if you're having a rough go of it, it can get out of hand. You know,
quickly.
And this is me very, 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 very much so minimizing a lot here. We're compressing a bit. Now imagine that already kind of negative tilt that comes to us rather naturally, and you make sure that everyone, everywhere, has been having the worst day imaginable under the most brutal regime imaginable for 10,000 years.
The social fabric is getting stretched in the negative direction by a lot.
There are orcs that want to squeeze you into a fine paste. There are elves who have real weird hang-ups and definitely will screw you over every moment they can. There's a blue man group in the corner over there. At least you think they're blue. Last time you looked too closely, there was a glint, and then that guy died from 5,000 miles away. And then there are also cockroaches. So many cockroaches that they can blot out the sun.
I don't like that.
And the only way you navigate...
Just call them the bugs? The cockroaches specifically is giving me the ick.
That was the point. The only way you navigate this is by keeping a lighthouse alive that costs thousands of human lives every single day. And that machine only serves to wrench a man apart and reforge him as a god against his will. You see why the warp is so mean?
It's a little bit mean.
Do you see why? Yeah.
Well, we have... Listen, we have one entire, like... trillions of people society that is just dedicated to keeping the kiln of the first flame burning.
Yeah. It's not great. And in 40K, because we always like to go that extra mile, not only are you plugged into this space and you leave a little bit of a shadow, all of us do. Some are more extreme than others, unless like you're talking like the Tau, the Kin, the Necrons. There are things that have such a non-existent psychic presence, they do not affect it in any way. But most people have a little bit, or at least enough that it works. Blanks also fall into that category where they don't really leave up.
They're kind of a hole in that rather than a light.
And then you also have the other extreme, which is the Tyranids that leave. It is this massive chittering hive that blots it out as it goes. And that's a whole horrifying thing. I can only imagine it's best described as a brain itch when they're around.
I don't like the sound of a brain itch.
It could be a soul itch.
Don't like the sound of either of those.
This is the afterlife in 40K, and your connection to it has been smothered. Imagine what that feels like.
Kind of icky.
Right? There is the other extreme, from not affecting it at all and smothering it out to being able to greatly affect it. And this is where the warp's magic effects come in. Because most of us are kind of a one-way thing, like I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Psychers are a two-way thing.
Mm-hmm.
So not only do they leave a little bit of a mark in the warp, they can reach into it and have the warp leave a little bit of a mark here, shaped by them.
Yeah.
Which is how you get lightning bolt. I mean, you're just reaching into the warp and out pops a lightning bolt because, come on.
I can grab a little bit of a Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
The stronger you are as a psyker, the stronger this bridge is and the wider the door is. So a baby psyker could light birthday candles or make lights flicker without really knowing it.
Moment from from Fantastic Four where the Human Torch snaps and his finger lights on fire like a match?
A baby, a little psyker could do that. A rather weak psyker could do that.
Yeah.
And then you have the zenith of psychers, Magnus, who can reach upwards and make the sky dip down before it cracks, and raw warp is now visible.
Amazing.
And you have eyes the size of mountains staring down at you. And if they look at you, you immediately go mad.
I'd imagine just looking up at that would make you go mad.
It's horrifying stuff. Don't look at it. Don't have it look at you.
This is pure cosmic horror.
Yes. The warp at its zenith is just a lot. And psychers at their zenith. Imagine the size of door Magnus is.
That's no longer a door. That's the point where we hit things we refer to as portals.
Yes. At what point is Magnus just a roving hole into the warp?
Yeah.
My favorite version of this, though, and it's going to regard the Primarchs, is the lion. For those of you that don't know, we're just going to do a real quick and dirty here. There's a guy named Jimmy Space, Big E. He is, for all intents and purposes at this point, the beginnings of a deity. He's real close, man.
He's a demigod, if not blurring the lines between demigod and god. He's
got angels. He's got burning legions. His sons are all freaky powerful. Just for the sake of explaining this in 50 seconds, this is effectively a pantheon of old, right?
Yeah.
And the Primarchs are his sons, and then their sons are the Space Marines you see everywhere. What a Space Marine is to a man is what a Primarch is to a Space Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And what Big E is to Primarchs.
So
you can see the gap in power here.
A whole nother gap.
Astronomical. Yeah. A Space Marine could crater you with a punch. A Primarch can do that to a Space Marine. And Big E, in theory, could do that.
Probably to just reality itself.
Yeah, I mean, look at what Magnus can do and realize he's a cheap copy of the real deal.
Yeah.
The thing I like about the Lion, though, is it shows the nature of the Primarchs and how they're all warpy.
Just a scoosh?
Because he's been asleep. He's one of the Emperor's 20-ish sons, and he's just kind of been pulling a sleeping beauty.
He was just taking a nap.
Yeah, I mean, all he's really been accomplishing is having his hairline recede. That's pretty much it. That's
poor guy, by the way.
He's been
poor guy. He went to sleep with flowing locks and woke up with the widow's peak and not the good kind where it's natural.
One. No, he got the cool one. He got the what's his name? He got the Ned Stark style one.
Oh
yeah.
He didn't get the Dracula style one.
No, he got a pretty good one.
Where it was the receding corners widow peak.
He got the Wise Knight widow's peak.
Okay,
which is kind of perfect for him at this point.
His entire gimmick is being a knight. So,
but you may think, or you may wonder, right? He's been asleep this whole time. Do Primarchs dream?
Did he dream?
Yes.
Okay, what did he dream about?
And the reason I'm mentioning the dream he had is because it is a great demonstration of the high end of warp usage, because he was able to dream a whole realm.
Did this come into existence?
There is a chunk of warp that is a mirror image of his childhood planet.
Oh.
And it is full of the beasts that he used to hunt, and it's this kind of misty forest that really only has him, a couple of his fallen, which we're not going to talk about.
You're not going to talk
about.
Some weaponry, by those guys.
Some weaponry, something that can ape all 20 Primarchs. Don't ask. And the most important thing for today, an old wounded king. Slowly dripping from his injuries, clearly weak, but stalked by beasts that will drink every drop that falls from him, but cannot hurt him. And he's fishing in their waters.
Who is this an allegory for?
Who do you think?
Do
you see why I want to do an Emperor episode so badly?
This is odd.
Right? And this is the height of warp usage, because this space is not just the Lion dreaming about his childhood home. This is a real place in the warp that he can come to. He can talk to that old wounded king. And most importantly, he can walk into the forest and walk out anywhere he wants.
This is his own personal pocket dimension.
And do you see why people really debate that Big E's a god at this point? Because one of his kids just passively did that.
Yeah.
He has a whole realm of chaos. It's tiny.
This is full.
It's tiny, but it's there.
This is full, maybe god behavior out of the Lion.
It's Demi for sure.
It's Demi for sure.
Demi behavior.
It's Demi, but we're again sliding into maybe.
Right?
We're blurring the line here.
And that is what the true shaping of the warp looks like. Like nowadays, the Lion can arrive. It's so cool, by the way. I want to redo the Lion episode now that I've read the newest books about him. But now, whenever there's a battlefield that needs him, you will be fighting, and then fog will roll in, trees will sprout up, and the Lion will arrive with a company of space marines.
I was going to ask, does it need to be a planet where there's already a forest, or does this materialize?
He reforests. Well, I mean, it leaves when he leaves, so I don't know how real the forest is.
So it's fake reforestation.
Still a big deal. Can you imagine being a guardsman, learning vaguely about each of the 20, and then just one of them who should not be around just shows up?
And he brought trees with him, saving the planets.
Yeah, but
in two ways.
Do you see also what I mean about the warp? Because you can just use it for almost your imagination is your limit.
This is the sick and twisted version of Green Lantern's imagine anything.
Your creativity is your upper limit.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I mean, yes, I get it. An Arthurian knight descending from an Arthurian forest, flanked by more knights, isn't the most creative thing ever. But come on,
this
That's
could also
so cool.
This could also be the warp just being endless. Have you seen Chaos's presentation in Hades?
Yes.
Where they're just wild, wacky. They have many faces coming out of them, and these are all of the faces that they could portray themselves as. And they have a little earth in their hands. I feel like that's a really good idea for what the warp could be is it is everything and nothing at the same time, and it takes shining the warp through somebody's lens to get a proper like shadow of a reality out of it.
Exactly. And it also shows the Primarchs are clearly something warpy.
They're obviously something warpy.
Because your average...
You shine the warp through your average guy and they burn.
Well, your average guy can cast Lightning Bolt. That's pretty cool.
Your average psyker
fair enough.
Can cast Lightning Bolt.
Yeah.
Your average guy goes, blood for the blood god, or I don't know any of the other phrases.
Nurgle has some of my favorite ones.
Does he?
Yes, they're all disgusting.
I don't want to hear them.
Okay, I figured as much.
What was it, pus for the pus god?
There's one that mentioned buboes is what I'm going to say. So, you asked. And so that is the height of warp control. The line can do that very consistently so far, and it doesn't seem to have any issues. Your average person being a doorway is very scary. Because, yay, you can cast Lightning Bolt. That's very useful. That's very neat. A demon can now walk through that.
Yeah.
If the warp is an ocean, you have just opened a valve. And any amount of water could flood in. You could use that water to put out a fire.
Yeah.
That water could also drown everyone.
It could also just, like, overpower the valve itself and crack through the wall around it.
Precisely. That happens all the time. Even the most powerful of powerful, like that's why I said the Lion hasn't done it yet, but Magnus punched a hole in Big E's basement. And that's just a thing that just spits out demons now. I mean, in the basement. That's a known problem that the custodians just go, whose shift is it?
I think you've also told me about just your everyday average psyker can just one day just like, oh, I failed a dice roll and now suddenly I'm a hole in the warp and like just demons start spilling through them.
Yes.
Yep. It's like, yeah, the valve gets overpowered, the wall cracks around them, and something bigger came out of what should have been a small hole.
And that's why they are so brutalized, let's say. I mean, you've seen the state-sanctioned sticker they wear at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one decent reason for it, because you could just fail a check and out pops a bloodthirster.
Yeah.
And we are not equipped to deal with that. We're a farming planet. Get that off.
Or you could just have, like, I don't know, the Jedi Academy for psychers, where you train them.
They've tried that.
Oh, does it not work?
You've put a lot of psychers in one place. What do you think happens?
You need it decentralized, and you can't really do that. That's a problem. The warp really is an insidious thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, no. Chaos is an insidious thing. The warp is true neutral. All things chaos come from the warp, but not all things in the warp are chaos. That's why I mentioned the lion's little world.
The warp is kind of just a force of nature rather than...
The lion is technically, he has a space in the warp. He's clearly warpish. He's not inherently evil. I mean, he's about as evil as anyone working for the most brutal regime imaginable.
You said he's warp-ish with the same intonation as like a fantasy race.
What? Oh,
he's like warpish.
Yeah.
Like he's dwarvish, he's warpish.
He's warpish, yeah. And so I highlighted that just to show that, like, despite the fact that everything bad does come from there, all the antagonists do, some of the protagonists, or at least the closest thing you can get to protagonists in 40k, I'll be honest, do use the warp and have space within it.
Yeah.
It's not just demon Primarchs.
It is.
Now, to be fair, this is the only one good one I could find, but still.
It's kind of like a rectangle square situation where not all warp is bad, but all bad things, well, not even all bad things come from the warp, because we still have the Tyranids.
Yeah, they're not warp.
They're not warpy.
Exactly. And the warp was also not always this bad. It's the afterlife for 40k, by the way. So when you die, that's what you have to look forward to.
Is this like Greek level of afterlife where there's a bottom tier that's just kind of awful and then a top tier, or does everybody go to the same place?
Howling Vortex.
Okay. Everybody goes to the Howling Vortex.
Yeah. And then from there, like, Khorne could pick you out. But Howling Vortex.
Okay.
Or, you know, if you lived a particularly fascinating life, one of the big four could show up.
Okay.
Theoretically, I mean, anything warpy could save you, but it's unlikely.
You're going to the Howling Vortex.
Now, it was not always like this, though. There was a time period where it was just a more standard issue afterlife. standard issue kind of reflection of the great mind,
Okay.
but or the collective unconscious. But the problem is it's hard to.
We've already been dragged in the negative direction, and so
No, there was a hard point when this began. This negative feedback loop began. It is impossible to gauge when, though, because chaos has a very it has a very, for lack of a better term, like I am that I am energy to it. You know, it is what it was, what it will be. It always has.
Slanesh is a force of nature. Khorne is a force of nature.
Yes.
Nurgle is a force of nature. They're not technically.
They have always existed. They will always exist, and they do always exist.
They're not technically evil. They're just doing what they were born to.
Oh no, I'd say again, the warp is neutral. They are not.
Okay.
They are not.
Well, when I say force of nature, I mean like this is what they were built to do.
The reason I would debate you on that is gravity exists and pulls objects together. Gravity does not revel in slamming them against each other.
Okay.
You know, like there's malice in here. Something has tainted this.
I see.
And that's the difference, you know?
I see.
That's the space that chaos gods occupy. There is good to them, you know? Like Khorne is honesty. He will never lie to you. But it is the honesty of a mugging. Wherein...
I'm not going to lie to you. Just give me your wallet.
Give me your wallet or die about it.
Yeah.
And most people just give you their wallet. That's not a really ideal
I feel
variant.
like Khorne would like demand your wallet and then still kill you.
Nope, he's honest.
Yeah,
Khorne is raw honest. Of all the four, he, I think, has never told a lie. It's honest Abe in there.
Fair enough.
So if he tells you, give me the money and you get to live, you will get to live. So give him the money. It's the honesty of what you, I hate to say a good mugging, but like a good mugging. You know? It's about the best you can get out of it. And so that's what I mean by it's been twisted a little bit. Nurgle is love, but it's a kind of self-love where it's like, you could soil the bed and I still love you. Don't leave that bed though. You know? That's just...
Can I go get a shower?
No. Nurgle likes you precisely how you are. Keep sweating into them sheets.
Okay.
Right,
I think we're done with this line of imagery.
And now do you understand what I mean by say there was a point where something went wrong?
Yeah.
And there are 2 points this could have been. Again, like I said, it's got a very... There's a reason I brought in like the whole beginning and end kind of aspect to it. The first time it could be was way back in the War in Heaven. Back when they were a bunch of apparently toads that created everything. I'm really, we're going to drive
aren't the old ones toads? They're toads, right?
We're just going to drive by this so
Big
fast.
frog.
We can't do the War in Heaven justice, so I won't.
Every time the old ones have gotten brought up in any of our 40K videos, I've just used the fantasy old ones art.
I also like the if the Emperor had a text-to-speech ones. You should use that one this time.
Not familiar with them.
Oh, they'll see it, and you'll see it too.
Okay.
I like that one as well. But back in the day, there were old ones. They were super duper powerful. They reached into the warp, and they had a good connection to it. But this was back when it was just a sea of souls, pretty much. It was a very neutral kind of affair. They then bumped into some people called the Necrons, who really wanted sunscreen. They didn't give them sunscreen.
They weren't the Necrons yet. They were the Necron tier.
We are simplifying. Too many proper nouns.
They were fleshy Necrons.
They wanted sunscreen. The old one said no to the sunscreen. They had a whole war about it with a very trustworthy guy named Mefretan, the friendly and not a deceiver. Now, the not a deceiver...
I feel like you've deceived me.
No, the not a deceiver helped them out, and together they began a war in heaven. Hard-ass name. Most brutal thing that's ever happened. It makes the heresy look like a fight in a sand pit.
I see where you're going here.
Do you?
I see where you're going here.
And the warp was used as a weapon more and more.
The war in heaven, corrupting the place that was...
Yep. It's a war that was so apocalyptic in scale, we can't even comprehend it. To say trillions died is an understatement. It's bad. And the old ones are just hucking new factions after new factions after new factions to try and solve this problem. Each one using the warp more and more as a weapon and less as a thing to hold reverence to, or to just kind of exist alongside it.
I see what's happening here.
And it is here that the first three were popped out. Obviously, Khorne came first because war in heaven.
Yeah.
And then the rest followed shortly after because of all this death, all this exploitation of the warp, all the suffering that was happening, started this spiral.
And I assume the plans within plans of the various factions here.
And the problem is they came out malicious in the warp, and they then had an effect on the real world that was malicious, which then has an effect on the warp that's malicious.
Vicious cycle.
It's this terminal loop that gets us to today's 40K, where they are huge swaths of the warp. They did not eat up as much real estate as they used to. They now control a big chunk of it. As big as you can get in a space that is infinite and formless.
Yeah.
You know? But that is the first...
I'd imagine, to use a very nerdy example, the warp and its location function at least a little bit like the nether, where it's like, what is it? Every 5 blocks in the nether is 15 blocks in the real...
The nether.
I was saying a thing.
Sorry, you said the nether.
Every 5 blocks or so.
Lives rent-free, baby. Rent-free.
We are both nerds here.
I hid every lyric to Diggy Diggy Hole in the Votan video, and none of y'all caught that. No, 5 of you did and look schizophrenic in the comments. I hid most of the hook to that song in that video, and if 5 people did, and everyone said you're crazy.
If they're still here watching that, they feel so validated now.
If they still are.
Anyway, I'd imagine the warp function's a little bit like the nether, where it's like every 5 blocks in the nether is like 15 in the overworld. So like it's infinite, but like you're gonna like correlate around this area that may be the Milky Way. No, not at all.
No.
Okay.
Well, I see where you're coming from, and I would agree with you if it didn't operate the way wormholes do effectively, where it's like, oh, look at this neat fabric, fold, punch a hole in it.
So the fabric is just going every which way.
Yep. The fabric is twisting and folding however I need it to for this specific moment, and sometimes it'll fold in ways that don't work for me.
I see.
Hence, you show up in like Egypt pyramid time, and you have like a pyramid building physique.
You're building pyramids now.
Exactly. And I just wanted to get to New York, man. I didn't want any of this. I didn't want to schlep boulders.
Well,
you know?
I guess you're schlepping boulders now.
But now that Chaos has done its whole vicious cycle to today, we now have the screaming tornado where you go when you die.
Amazing.
And you maybe get taken by Slaanesh and go into the Fungeon, if you're Eldar. Or Nurgle and go into the swamp. Or Khorne and you go into the fight pits. Or Tzeentch, where you just get stuck in a maze for his amusement.
I don't like any of these options.
It's
all 5 of these options are kind of awful.
Well, those are 4 options I gave.
The neutral one of just staying in the vortex.
Oh, no, there's a 5th god, but we can't talk about him.
We can't?
No. And then there's the 6th place.
Oh, is this the one that has the weirdness around his canonicity?
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
The one who starts with an M?
Yes.
I see.
He who shall not be named. And then there's also the possibility that the Emperor's, again, super duper not confirmed, let me be clear, but there's a possibility with everything going on with the Emperor that he's becoming his own kind of thing.
But he doesn't really have a defined space within the warp that we know of.
Not to put my finger on the scale, but if his kid can make a space in the warp and his kid has not been eating 1,000 psychers,
he definitely has a space in the warp that we just have not seen yet.
I mean, if I remember correctly, just a custodian did it. I'm not minimizing Valdor. I know he's not just a custodian, but a custodian has his own little space.
Okay.
We're not going to cover that. Do you see what I mean about the warp?
I would love to.
Do you see what I mean about the warp?
It's confusing.
There's so much going on.
There's so much going on.
Well, so you could luck out and go to maybe Jimmy Space's variant of heaven, if that's a thing. Again, not canon. Super not canon. I can't make that clear enough.
I would love to see like somebody explore that, and it just looks like the Empire pre everything.
Honestly, Jimmy Space's variant of heaven is you get to meet him, I am real, and then you just get reincarnated as a guardsman in the front lines. That's probably the closest version.
I was just going to I like the idea of like him just recreating the Empire like like honestly Great Crusade.
Someone else is working on that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With Space Marines that have wings. There's so much going on in the warp.
Jeez.
There's so much going on in the warp.
There's
but that's variant A on how this cycle started.
Yes.
Variant B is old. And I don't mean old in canon, I mean old in our timeline.
like back to the beginning of 40K, like mid 80s,
Malice old. It's sorry to age anyone who remembers the 90s. It's 90s old here. It's a kind of thing.
Yeah, my brain works weird. You say 90s and I'm like, that's not that old. It was only 10 years ago. And then I realized that I'm 24 and that was 30 years ago.
34 to be precise. Don't age yourself down. Relish in your geezerdom.
Oh, don't do that to me.
Anyway, hold on. Oh, fuck. Yep. Anyway, it's the kind of thing like Malice and like the fact that Obi-Wan is a real canon character in 40K.
That hasn't changed. He's still a...
Yeah, it's that league of this should have been retconned. Nobody noticed? How did nobody know? Okay. All right. Sure. And so back in the day, because y'all know me, I like my apocrypha. I like my just... This was a part of 40K. This is still technically a part of 40K because nobody bothered to cut it out. We're just going to pretend it's not real. We're just never going to deal with this. We're going to shut these books. We're going to seal them in a vault. And only if you've read these specific books from the 90s
will you know about this esoteric knowledge.
Yes. But the old theory was that they were not formed until our Middle Ages. Yes.
Our Middle Ages specifically?
Yes. Khorne is a direct result of the Crusades.
Okay.
Yes. With Nurgle coming from the plagues that would follow.
The bubonic plague that was used as a weapon in some of that yeah.
And Tzeentch rising from the Renaissance and the birth of modern day politicking.
This is a good theory.
It's cool.
We know where Slaanesh came from.
Yeah, Slaanesh was never. We never did that.
We knew where they came from.
It's cool, but the reason people don't like it and the reason it's kind of sectioned off of 40K is because it's so human centric.
It's very human centric.
It's so human centric.
I get it. The Crusades being the origin of the god of war would make sense.
Maybe a little bit of Genghis's time on Earth.
If this was not...
I know it's Genghis.
I know.
I just want to be clear.
That's not what I was saying. I was going to say that's a lot of war happening. And like, yeah, it's a lot, but in the face of the war in heaven...
Yeah.
This is not on the same level.
Right? And then, again, it's kind of been shoved off to the side. I do like it from the perspective of it. It would posit that we are so base awful that it took the Eldar New Game Plusing 7 times to create one god with near infinite lifespans and nothing to fear. Meanwhile, we knocked it out after a couple hundred years. 3 of them.
I don't know. I guess somehow, even though it came out 30 years later, Warhammer 40K is inspired by Dark Souls. Humanity is the one unique race in the universe that has the Dark Soul.
No, it's humanity is the virus.
It's
it's an interesting thought, and there's definitely something that could be had there, especially when you consider the text, if I remember correctly, stated they slumbered until this time.
I see. This woke them up.
Maybe they existed during the war in heaven. Like that was the thing that birthed them.
And they went down for a quick nap.
Well, like a toddler is not exactly like, look. I don't care that you are going to be 6'4" and have a great career in the NFL. As a toddler, you're getting washed on that field. And so maybe that's how the Chaos Gods worked, you know? So instead of putting the baby in pads and having them go run out against the Patriots, you just give it some time and wait until it at least gets into college.
But that would kind of insinuate the existence of like an inbuilt warp caretaker for these minor gods to then allow them to become major gods.
things can just sleep in the warp, slowly gaining power. I mean, think about it. It is the collective unconscious. Think about how much unconscious thought is fed into these. Korn, the god of war, ambition, drive, fury, violence.
I see.
Think about how many of your thoughts inadvertently feed Korn. Did you hit the gym? You just fed Korn.
Well, not today.
Inadvertently. But that's what I mean, where these things do not need any active help. That's why they're so dangerous, because...
Did you add to your edging streak? Guess what? Slanesh.
Because the more active the thought, the less likely it's being held by the collective, you know? It's far more likely it's these passive thoughts you have. Oh, did you deeply care about someone and love them as they are? Just fed Nurgle.
You just fed Nurgle. Which is kind of a little bit twisted, isn't it? Just like, oh,
I just unconditionally love a toddler? Did you just like a toddler enough to change them? Guess what?
Well, I feel like that would do like, it will leave you at net zero.
Nope.
With Nurgle? Because you loved them?
The Chaos Gods are not fair.
But then you changed them, which made them less filthy.
The Chaos Gods are not fair. This is a known thing.
I say.
This is why it is better.
You can't take away points. You can only give them.
This is why the Inquisition always goes, it's better to kill 1 million innocent men than one guilty goes free. Because chaos, you can feed it more than you can take away from it unless you find somewhere else to direct it. So you have to have a god of your own that does this. And it is known by the collective. So you must have like a known god of love, effectively, that is shared by the collective mind.
That is not Nurgle.
To directly move it away from Nurgle.
Yeah.
To which Nurgle is a known thing that has legs. His art doesn't show it, but he's got legs. He will go take that god. He's already kidnapped one. So that's the problem here. Do you see the great qualm that chaos provides?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why I wanted to leave both of the options on the table, because both are technically. I mean, by raw, nobody has come out to say no yet.
Yeah.
Still, like, barely canon.
Well,
I'm talking barely.
I can see another argument for like the War in Heaven may have birthed them, but the War in Heaven kind of also murked everything in the universe aside from the Eldar, galaxy, aside from the Eldar, and the Eldar themselves probably weren't doing a whole lot. Like, maybe they were feeding Tzeentch aside from Slanesh.
The Eldar recognized what the warp was because they came from the old ones, and so they had their own gods.
I see.
Starve the Chaos Gods.
So they were feeding into their own gods. So I can see the argument that they were birthed in the War in Heaven.
They just didn't have anything for Slanesh.
They didn't have anything feeding them.
They never foresaw OnlyFans.
And so they... To be fair, did we?
No, we did not.
They were born in the War in Heaven. They had nothing feeding them for a little bit, so they went down for a nap. And then the Middle Ages, like, woke them up a little bit.
Again, dubiously canon.
Dubiously canon, but that's... I feel like I'm doing the best of melding them too.
And honestly, I could see a 40K doing that, because they when something is around for this long, they're aware of it too.
Yeah.
Somebody doesn't want to deal with it yet.
It's a lot of thinking. What do I do to like make these fit?
Yeah. The one thing we do know that is canon though is the big four operate like cancer on the warp. They are all consuming and they're just eating more real estate. Again, really hard to gauge how much of a threat this is. It is an infinite space. So it's kind of...
Well,
it's really hard to gauge how much of a problem this is, but considering the impact they have nowadays, the fact that a line in the sky can happen of straight warp and it's just a chaos problem leads me to believe they've been eating a lot of the infinite.
Yeah.
Yes.
And who knows what would happen if they somehow were able to eat all of the infinite?
We don't know, because there are species native to the warp. There are like warp wildlife and animals that exist there. That
really?
That are neutral.
There's like warp ecology?
Have you ever had a nightmare?
Yes.
You may have just created something in the warp.
I see. Okay, that's kind of cool though.
Isn't that so neat?
That's really cool.
We do have one map of the warp that's kind of useful. It really simplifies it a lot and makes it like a traversable space. and shows all 4 chaos realms. But the problem is it doesn't account for the warp's changing nature.
I was gonna
Like,
say
it's not a neat, like, we don't have 4 states bordering each other. It's like if states could grow and shrink depending on.
this is kind of like, this is a 4th dimensional area. There's like a think piece, like kind of tech demo video game that I remember from a couple of years ago that it plays with the 4th dimension. And so you play in, like, you know, up, down, left, right. But then you can change the 4th dimension and you watch objects like phase in and out of being within the play space. And it looks really cool. I've probably got footage of it running right now. But I'd imagine that's what you would have to do with a warp map, is not only up, down, left, right, but like not necessarily when, because this is the warp and it gets weird, but that 4th dimensional slider that changes where everything exists.
Yes. We do have some descriptions of what the realms do look like, though, despite the map being kind of useless. We know, for example, like Khorne's is a wasteland with oceans of boiling viscera. That's just a thing.
And I'd imagine a lot of dust, but that dust isn't sand, it's bones ground down.
Yes, and earthquakes and hurricanes.
Really? Well, the most violent weather makes sense for the god of violence.
Every time you fear violent weather, guess what?
You cause another... Wow.
Do you see the qualm with chaos?
Yeah, they kind of just take whatever... You know how you can catastrophize about the worst possible, like, event happening, and it kind of never does? You've now caused that worst event happening in the warp.
Yes.
Like, you may not have, like, farted and pooped yourself on stage while delivering a good speech, but you did in the warp now.
Yeah, sure. That's one way to do it. Sure.
What?
Khorne's realm also has 1 orc in it.
I
That's
imagine
not a joke. 1. He keeps it there for
he's
entertainment.
the happiest orc
Tuska
ever.
demon killer.
Yeah.
You won't guess what he's doing.
Demon killing.
Just demon killing.
Again, happiest orc ever.
Yeah. What Tzeentch's is, it's a crystal labyrinth.
That is ever changing, I assume.
It's everything you think. It's everything you think it is verbatim. Nobody has ever made it through except for one random little girl who was maybe Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz.
That's
maybe
funny.
The Emperor in disguise, or maybe just some little girl. We actually don't know.
I'd like the image of both of those at the same time. The Emperor dressed as Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz,
but like fully muscular propaganda version of the Emperor. Yeah, that would work.
Just in a like blue stripy dress and a blouse.
Nurgle actually has a like the way it's been described has been changing, but it's taking a very like you know those like southern big mansions, right?
Yeah.
Now drop one in the middle of the worst swamp you've ever seen.
I see.
And that's kind of what he has. It is this beautiful garden full of the worst things you've ever seen. And he's perpetually stirring a gumbo pot of the worst diseases you have ever seen and force feeding them to the one god he has in containment, because that's his hobby.
She's
the god of healing. She can tank it.
Is she okay with this?
Of course not.
Okay. Ick.
Yes.
Icky.
And then next up is Slaanesh, who we just can't. No, we can cover. It's kind of the...
It's like,
we've done a Patreon episode on it.
Dante's 7 Rings of Hell.
Yes, but
basically.
There are rings of pleasure. And when we did
I'd say they'd still align with the 7 rings in the same way, though. Just kind of like...
It's different variants of excess. We've already done a full episode on this on Patreon because it's Slaaneshi, so you can think about the excess that's involved there. Mm-hmm. But it's basically 7 rings of everything you could ever want. And the way we know about it is by a group of Grey Knights going through this and slowly succumbing to different vices until the last one makes it all the way there and is ready to kill... and is ready to kill Slaanesh. And the moment they're about to, Slaanesh turns around and they realize... Damn it, they're hot!
I don't know why, but the image that like comes to mind, whenever I think of this event, is like the Grey Knight arriving to Slaanesh's house, and it's a normal like American, like suburban, like McMansion, 2 floors. If you've ever seen Home Alone, I think
The Home Alone house.
I think of Slanesh's home as the Home Alone house, maybe in pink. And I can see him walking through the front door, and she comes out of the kitchen in nothing but like an apron. And I mean nothing but an apron.
Oh,
and
Lord.
he goes, and she's holding like a plate of muffins. And he's like, uh-oh, I might just have to
if I remember
wife
correctly-
this being up.
If I remember correctly, it's more of like it's in this grand palace with a garden, right? And Slanesh is at the garden, but back is turned to them. And when Slanesh turns around is when he goes, "Damn it. Yeah, Emperor did not protect me from this. They were supposed to be ugly. That's what the poster said. They didn't prepare me for this." And so that's how the last one fell. Which is just a real thing that happened.
There's so much fun that could be had with this story.
There is. And I'm sad that there's not more art of Slanesh, because it's the excuse to go hog wild. Draw her, or draw them as hot as you want.
Well,
Draw them as hot as you want. It doesn't matter. Whatever you're into.
The thing is, like, Slanesh is everything you could ever want.
And that's what I'm saying.
And how do you sum up everything? Like, I'd
I
imagine...
can tell you how you sum it up. You hire an artist to draw it with one hand. That's how. And that's the only way you could ever accomplish a piece on Slanesh.
The thing I think about Slanesh is they're, like, ever-changing. Like, what do you want to see specifically?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And so you can't sum that up for every single person.
But I would still find infinite interest in seeing what the collective is into.
Or maybe that one specific artist.
Or maybe that one specific artist.
Just grab an artist by the neck and go, every single kink you have, put it on paper.
We're just going to move on to the spaces that are not operated by the Big Four, which have the very fun and chipper name of the Formless Wastes.
This, very chipper. Makes me happy.
You gotta guess what they look like.
I assume formless wastes.
Yeah, they have rivers of tar, petrified trees, castles of bone. It's always changing. It's always shifting. It's always remaking itself with every thought and emotion of every sentient creature that does have an impact.
It's currently bad right now, isn't it?
Oh, it's all been bad.
Okay.
Oh, it's always been bad. This is where if you don't pledge to any one of the Big Four, you will go.
Okay.
After you go through the Soul Cyclone.
So you need
Cyclone!
You need to be blended first before you end up in this place?
Brother, I don't make the rules.
I'm not asking you if you made the rules.
Sometimes you just wind up there. Sometimes you get blended.
Okay.
You roll the dice.
Sure.
It is in these formless wastes that you will see most baby gods, effectively.
Baby gods?
Demon princes, people that are particularly powerful, but not very powerful.
So, like, Vashtor, that level?
He's the exception. He has his own place called the Forge of Souls. Because the warp's going through an industrial revolution.
Fun.
Yeah, and so he is the guy that makes weapons for everyone.
So he's their own personal mechanicum.
Yes.
Do the Dark Mechanicum have anything to do with this guy?
We're getting far too deep into this.
I'm asking good questions and I'm not receiving the answers to them.
The problem is it's hard to gauge because A, it's very new, and B, it's always under assault. Because if any of the major four got their hands on it, that would tip the scales of the war.
Would they break Vashtor over their knee?
Of course!
Or would they ask him nicely to make weapons for them?
No!
Okay.
It depends on who gets their hands on him. Zinch would trick him, Khorne would break him, Nurgle would rot him, and Slanesh would...
something him.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the qualm that he's faced with. He's also in the very unique position of being probably second to Big E, most likely to be another Chaos God. Like, he's really close to being a Chaos God.
Like,
he's
Chaos
certainly working on it.
Chaos God Tadpole.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. But this is one of the places that is unaligned. It's this unending forge, just full of suffering. And he can make, the funny thing is he can make like these demons bound in machines that are very, very, very powerful and can exit the warp much sooner than they typically could, power-wise, just because it takes a pretty big deal.
A little bit of energy to get out.
You have to be a pretty big deal to get out and stay out for a while, you know?
Yeah.
So these things can get out and stay out for a while without necessarily being big deals. So you can just kind of flood the battlefield with them. But there's a catch. No matter who they serve, they must always come back to defend a forge. So even if you are a Khornate demon, if Khorne's attacking, you must come back and fight Khorne.
Okay.
Losing points.
Huh.
Yeah. Oh, and these machines also tortured screaming souls.
So very fun.
The sky is blacked out. It is how your average chimney sweep... It is how your average chimney sweep stuck in a chimney would think of this. Yes. It's bad.
It's a very, very dark image right there.
And yet, that is how it is. It is unfortunately just horrific. We drove by Biggie really fast.
That we did.
And
Are we going to come back to him?
Well, because he doesn't have raw space in the warp yet. But
I mean, doesn't he have a weird planet that...
No.
I thought
nothing's been confirmed yet.
I thought there was a beam of light that shined directly
That's
from him.
in the real place.
Okay.
It is okay. So
I thought that planet that it was shining on was like weird in betweeny in the warp, not in the warp on the.
It's right on the border, if I remember correctly. And anyway,
Yeah.
for those of you that don't know, the light of the Astronomicon shoots outwards into space and does touch something right at the edge of the Eye of Terror, I think. One of the big holes into the warp. And there are all kinds of very imperial-looking demons running around. And it's the sketchiest thing you've ever seen. I need to do a whole episode on the Emperor's godhood, potentially.
The Inquisition doesn't know what to do with these things. No. Do we revere them? Do we prevent anybody from ever seeing these things? Do we kill them?
We will never know. The next location in the warp, though, because he doesn't have any space yet, I really hope they do.
It'd be fun.
I really hope they
Again,
do.
I would love to see like a big reveal of his castle in the sky, Anne Orlando style.
Well, no, I've seen a lot of people comment that like because the way it works is collective belief imprinting into the warp, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not the real emperor you will get. You will get propaganda emperor.
You will get like, yeah.
And so I would love there to be this old king stuck in the lion's place, the shattered screaming man stuck on his throne, unable to do anything, and then the worst version of the emperor just there.
The one he didn't want.
Pretty much. The one that every single person would or the version that Imperial propaganda reveres specifically as the great conqueror of the stars, manifest destiny, the manimal, you know? If you really had to boil down how they hype Big E, that's really how you do it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
if you're gonna boil down how I'm gonna hype Big E, it's gonna be like that.
I mean, yeah.
So there's a lot of fun potential there. I don't think G-Dub has decided if they want to, because at the end of the day, all of this boils down to what G-Dub wants.
I think they're still vibing out what they want to do with him.
A little bit of fence sitting, but also, getting the right writer, because if you do it wrong, this is kind of the longest running plot thread in 40K. Do not screw it up.
They don't want to end times it.
Yeah. So I could see them leaving the Emperor be for a while.
Yeah.
The other place that is not controlled by any of the ruinous powers is the Well of Eternity.
This sounds oddly pleasant.
It is said to be the source of time itself.
So this is either very chaotic or very, as I said, pleasant.
It's not chaotic.
It's not chaotic?
All of the chaos gods stay away from it.
Out of fear or out of they can't go near?
Well, it is where time and space began. And so that could be where time and space ends.
I see.
And if they're the beginning and the end, they really don't want to find out what the end is.
Huh.
The only person who wants to know what this is Tzeentch, because it is something he does not understand. And Tzeentch's great way of doing it is by effectively just dunking demons into it over and over again.
And seeing what happens to them.
Yep.
And this is how we got Kairos Fateweaver.
Precisely. He's the only one to survive, and demons don't age. He came out looking like a prune.
He looks weird.
He looked like he just cruised from here to Alaska.
He's also like rambling maniacally.
So he is your typical C3 Corvette owner. Throw some New Balances on this man. Throw some New Balances on Kairos Fate Weaver, and you have something that is looking both to the past and to the future, rambling incoherently about its car. Tell me I am wrong.
I would love to see Kairos Fate Weaver that way, talking both pleasantly about the C2 and the C4 at the same time out of both heads while staring at a C3.
He would be talking very pleasantly about the C1 and the C2 while talking very negatively about the C4 through the C8. And not talking about the C3 before him. Yeah, but Kairos in canon is constantly blathering about the future and the past and cannot see the present. That's a known weakness of his, but he's also surrounded by 9 times 9 demons all writing down what he says, because some of it might be useful.
I love how he's just surrounded by Patrick and SpongeBob. Just write that down, write that down, write that down.
Well, he's given the winning lotto numbers like 10 times now, dude.
But also, he's giving all of the lotto numbers at the same time.
Sometimes they're the winning lotto numbers in 1832.
Yeah. Sometimes this is the winning lotto numbers in 2077.
Yep, and we just write it all down. Write it all down. This is also one of the bits that lends to the theory of the deep warp.
The deep warp?
Because theoretically, this is super not canon, by the way. This has not been this has been referenced, let me tell you right now, 3 times. 3 times tops.
Like, are we talking about the difference between the ocean and the abyss?
Yes.
Okay.
But it is enough for people to really latch on to this theory, especially because the warp's an ocean, you know, so it really works. The first one is that well of eternity that makes you think that there is more to the warp, something deeper, something scarier.
Like, we start leaving the weird 4th dimension and we start entering like the back rooms of the universe, the deep code.
Yes, exactly. The next time we hear it referenced is in the Harlock Legacy books. I'm gonna blaze right through this. A guy was trying to pet cemetery his wife.
Cool.
It is really weird how he was going to accomplish it, but he was trying his best and he vanished without a trace.
Did he try to, like, Zinch style dip her in the well of eternity?
All we know is when a demon is captured and it speaks to an inquisitor with veiled references about him being in there, saying that he's in an abyss that none, not even my kind, can escape. Yes. And it is said it is a place no man nor God returns unchanged. And then the next time we have it is in Path of Heaven, which is far more compelling, if I'm going to be honest. It is when...
I mean, that one just tells a cosmic horror story. What is going on?
Here it is described as the seethe is an ocean. It all has its currents, its depths, its storms. Near the surface, you can see the Cartomancer's light. You can follow it, and you can use your Geller fields to stay safe. But you are kept barred from them. If you go below its upper limits, go deeper, your aegis will shatter. The lights will go out, the eye will be blinded. When men say they traverse the warp they boast, for no mortal does more than skim across eternity's face, like stones thrown by a child. We do not belong here, it is poison for us, and the deeper in, the worse the poison.
Very telling that they don't even say, you're just playing in the shallows like a child. They say, you're skimming the top.
You're a rock skimming the surface. Right.
Which means what happens when you go even deeper than that?
And if you think about it, if the warp is an ocean, you know, up top we got like great white sharks. They're pretty neat. You got, like,
again, that's what I was saying. There's a difference between the ocean and the abyss.
Yes.
There is a startling and stark difference.
Giant squid and blobfish.
There's a startling and stark difference between, like, the ocean, like, yeah, there's fish in there. You got your coral reefs, you got your thing. And then the bottom of the Mariana Trench, where there is nothing but a bunch of sand, some crabs, and one plastic bag.
Far more than one.
Well, one that we've observed.
No, far more than one, bro. It's sad.
One that we've observed.
Have you seen the footage from when James Cameron was down there?
There was only one.
No, there's a couple.
Oh.
I swear there's a couple.
No, I thought there was only one.
No, and then like bits of like floating just plastic chunks. What? It's a wonder material.
It's a wonder material.
But
Never decomposes.
But yes. So that is the theory of the deep warp. This place with things you can't even fathom, really. Things that would make the chaos gods look like children, which makes you think it has to just be raw basal urges in there.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, the stuff animals think.
There's like we stop leaving emotions.
You have hunger in there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was going to say you have like spinal column responses in there.
Exactly.
Like you have in the deep warp, instead of having anger or the need to like whatever Slanesh does, you have somebody like tapped your knee and you kicked. Yes. That's what's in the deep warp.
Yes. And whatever is in there is very terrifying if it's a real place. Again, these are 3 references in 40 years. That's 1 a decade. We're due for a 4th to really even it out. Mm-hmm. That's it. So
I don't know. Maybe the 4th is the big one.
I just had to mention it because a lot of people do like it.
Where we tear reality apart at the seams.
And it's a very cool idea when you think about it. And it works really well within the framework we've developed to understand the warp.
Yeah.
Another place that is fully unaligned, but in the warp, and I suppose if the deep warp is real on the surface of it, would be the Great Green.
The what?
The Great Green.
What do you mean the Great Green?
What do you think is in the Great Green?
The Big Nurgle? No?
I'll give you one more guess. There are 2 people eternally fighting.
Oh, I love these guys. Hello, Gork and Mork.
Yup. Gork and Mork are real, and orcs have an orc heaven. And this is where it is.
I'm surprised that Orc Heaven isn't just Khorne's domain.
No.
This
is what I mean about you have to redirect it. Orcs should feed Khorne.
But they don't.
They have it redirected to Gork and Mork. And so inadvertently, the thing that would make Khorne win de facto will never work for him.
Because
they have their own thing, and
Gork
it gives
and
them the law that they will use to rage across the entire galaxy. It is... We don't really know what it is, because only orcs have ever talked about it. But you effectively go up there, you get to see Gork and Mork after you die a warrior's death, witnessing the true orcs fighting it out, and it inspires you to get back on the battlefield.
And then you reincarnate.
Live, die, repeat. That's Orc Heaven. I die to respawn for another fight.
You get sent back to the like mid-game lobby.
Yes. You effectively get sent back to the mid-game lobby. You get to see the best of the best playing the game at its highest level. I'm talking, you walk in there, like you trip, sprain your knee on the court, you black out, you get to see prime Kobe for an hour straight.
I was gonna say,
and you wake back up.
I was gonna say something stupider.
What?
You die in Fortnite and you get sent to the Travis Scott concert dimension, and then you come back.
Just sucking the momentum out of any analogy I could create. Sure, why not? Whichever one you prefer, I suppose. But that does bring an end to the unaligned areas of the warp that you can explore. The Eldar have their own little space with their own gods, but I care about the Eldar, and some of you care about the Eldar. GW does not. So
it also seems like they're at their very lowest at the moment. So
yeah, they're very down.
They
have other concerns.
They probably control like a square centimeter of warp space.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not that much.
It's not that much.
Yes. That is all stuff your average Joe will never interact with, though. Their interactions with the warp is limited to travel, but that's not even it. The far more likely way they will interact with the warp is the form of a storm.
The warp leaking out into reality, I assume?
Yep, and consuming my world, therefore making it impossible for any help to get here ever again. And, oh god, there are demons here now.
Oh, fun.
Or, the other way they interact with it is the line in the sky that's screaming. And again, spitting demons out.
Just constantly?
Mm-hmm.
We could probably measure this as a consistent flow rate of demons.
Yes. Yes. And now warp storms do happen in the warp, like that's how ships get lost. Mm-hmm. But one day, there are places that a warp storm started and it's not stopped, like Great Red Spot style, which I think did stop.
No,
or got smaller.
The red spot's still going.
Mm-hmm.
I'd assume, to put this back into the ocean imagery, this is like you have turbulent waves, and sometimes they like splash really far up onto the beach instead of staying in the ocean, but you still have like the big currents within the ocean during this turbulent time.
Yes.
So you have warp storms in the warp, but they just like splash out into reality.
Yep. The other way the warp and you will ever interact is by the simple fact that sometimes one guy will turn to chaos, start a ritual, and then demons are here. Or worse, the full chaos god for a couple seconds.
Cool.
I mean, that's a thing that has happened.
Sure.
A planet was unlucky enough to have Angron on it, and he swung with Korn's back behind that swing.
Oh, I know this thing, and he just sliced the planet in half.
Yes. So that is another way the warp can interact with you, and it's never
You
great.
you just get unlucky, and suddenly your planet's in half, and how'd that happen?
Yes. But now I got to turn it over to you. What do you think of? Oh, no. One more thing.
One more thing.
Sometimes your planet can get dunked in the warp. And that's never.
This is high tide. My rock just is in the warp now.
Yeah. Well, like whenever there's a warp incursion, it depends on who's doing it. You know, Korn doing it, there's a war now raging. Nurgle doing it, whoa, the CDC can't do a damn thing right now. That's nuts.
You think you can social distance stop the spread? No, it's already in your house.
The
it's
curve's
in your
flattening
cells.
you.
Yeah, the curve's flattening you.
Yeah, no, there's nothing you can do about this.
And I would love us in Soviet Russia joke, but in Nurgle's dimension, you don't flatten the curve flattens you.
Yeah, and so it does depend very greatly on which chaos god you're going with, but sometimes your planet can just get wholesale dunked in and pulled out, and that always has fun effects.
Fun, you say?
Usually it's a lot of demons.
I wouldn't say it's fun.
Usually it's a lot of demons.
Maybe interesting, but fun is a stretch.
It's fun for the guys in the warp, because they have more real estate.
I'm a person. I don't belong there, and I don't want to be in there.
Well, you can, so long as you're on the right side of your planet.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes when a planet's dunked in there, it's forcibly by like a demon Primarch who says, I want this. And you can't really fight that.
You can't really do anything about
And so
that.
they will shape it however they want. Magnus has the planet of sorcerers, which is just like the kingdom of nerds, effectively.
I'd imagine there's just books flying everywhere.
Yep, Mortarion, another one of the Emperor's kids, has basically reforged his old homeworld. A lot of them like to do this, honestly.
Yeah.
Into this exact replica of it for nostalgia's sake, I suppose.
So it's untouched by disease, relatively?
No, it's still the same.
Okay.
Because Morty's bitter. Morty's very bitter.
Okay. So it's radioactive and there are pools of vomit.
But it can get very creative, too. Like, one of my favorite worlds that exists in canon and is a Slaneshi world is a planet that, upon closer inspection, you realize is a morbidly obese man in the fetal position.
A what?
There are no rules to the warp.
Once
you get in there, there are no rules to the warp. So yes, there is a canon morbidly obese man who is in the fetal position, and he's the size of a planet, and it is home to the Noise Marines. This is not a lie. This is all the truth.
Okay.
And they, quote, descend from his pores.
Don't like that.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, planets.
No, I get it. That makes sense, but I don't need to like it.
Welcome to Slanesh. You're the one who's always joking about them.
You know, I forget that this is also their gimmick.
Yeah, it's excess. It's the fat man curled in the fetal position. If Slanesh produced a TV show, it'd be My 600-Pound Life.
That show upsets me. It feels like modern day P.T. Barnum.
I mean, yeah, I've said that before. It's
very grim.
I mean, they hose fat people off in their front lawns.
It doesn't.
That's not helping them lose weight. You're just hosing a fat man off in his front lawn.
It's unironically that scene from The Office where like Dwight is asking Angela to hose down his aunt. It's unironically that is happening on My 600-Pound Life.
Yeah, but
except in The Office, it's played off as a joke. This is awful. In My 600-Pound Life, it's like, haha, look at this guy. Which that's what that show screams, is not like a feel bad for them. It screams point and laugh, which is so just
Well,
icky.
the purpose of shows like that is my life's not that bad. That's the purpose of it. And to be fair, it
could
works.
be worse.
I watch that and I go, my life's not that bad.
It could be worse.
It could be much worse.
It could be worse.
And so there's an air of thankfulness to it, but it is very excessive.
It's so excessive.
Everything...
It just gets icky.
Yeah. Everything in the warp doesn't have to follow rules. Everything that comes from the warp doesn't follow rules either. So typically, like, demons take damage, but it's not in a very logical way. Like, they're just little things that don't quite line up correctly with demons.
Is it like, listen, you slash at me, a person, with a knife, and I take, I now have a cut because of that. But if you slash at a demon, like, they took 10 points of slashing damage.
No, they react to it properly, but looking at them just has this sense of wrongness to it. Like it's aping moving correctly. Like it has to account for gravity to make it, like it'll walk and it just doesn't walk correctly. Sometimes they don't cast shadows.
I see.
You know, like a blast will knock them back, but it would not be an amount that maths out appropriately. You know, like, you know, that we all have an internal kind of sense of physics where an object is thrown, you can vaguely clock how this is going to shake out. It throws that off constantly.
It's like when an animation doesn't make sense.
Yes, that's exactly correct. But now I got to turn it over to you. What do you think of the warp?
Well, for one, I'm surprised we haven't done this video in so long.
Right?
For two, it intrigues me to like such a degree that like I want to do more like personal digging into this subject, just because like
warp travel will be its own thing. Gork and Mork's realm will be its own thing. All of the realms will be their own thing.
No, just
the
like
Forge of Souls could be their own thing. Everything I mentioned this episode could be its own thing.
Just the weird metaphysical stuff behind it of just like the layers of reality. It seems like it's very like fleshed out.
You would think.
It's really cool sounding.
I have done a lot of duct taping in faith of almost every time it's mentioned.
I say.
So
I guess
you'd be reading a lot of 40K books for about 2 sentences and then putting them away.
I see. This is the most concise this is going to be.
Maybe.
I mean, very in character.
I think Liber Chaotica is your best bet if you really want it.
Very, very in character of the warp to be this esoteric and uncategorizable. God, I'm not saying that word right. But yeah, really cool. I like it from like a weird metaphysics perspective. It sounds really cool.
Part of why we didn't cover it until now is because it requires a lot of previous knowledge. You know, I cannot excise what the warp is from what it does. Like, you have to know who the Emperor is. You have to know some of his kids. You have to, like, there's a lot of proper. I typically only throw out the proper nouns that are needed for this episode. There's a lot that were needed this episode.
Yeah.
So do you see why I kind of like gotta work on
this?
You have to get your general bearings here, because if I did this back in the beginning before you even knew the war in heaven, oh boy,
it would be a bit of a pain.
Yeah, but now I can just fully drive by it.
Yeah. Because I already know what happened then.
It's great. It's great. But yeah, that does bring an end to this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to vote for either the Schola Progenia or the Servitors. And as
again, the military Hogwarts
sad.
or
sad.
me sad.
Make Coda sad. And
the dark parts of cyberpunk, the ones that I don't like to talk about.
Yes. And as always, thank you for being you.